Thank you everyone for joining. You are on mute as you come in. We will get started in just 1 minute or so. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to use the chat box. All right, it is 5:31, and to be respectful of everyone's time, we have a pretty good crowd. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this screen and hand it over to Kent Satterfield.
Thank you, Sabrina, and welcome everyone of NCOBS. And just to ensure you know this is an outward bound gathering, we'll open with a reading. We should so live and labor in our time that what came to us as seed may go to the next generation as blossom, and what came to us as blossom may go to them as fruit. This is what we mean by progress. That's Henry Ward Beecher. That seemed especially fitting for our school right now that, as you know, after 14 years of dedicated service and sort of overseeing all our great staff that tend the orchard that is the North Carolina Outward Bound School, Whitney is going to retire. We have a great search committee hard at work. We'll conduct a national search for the next executive director, and we anticipate that may take 6 or 8 months. And so it is my distinct privilege and honor to introduce you to our interim executive director, Ken Lawson. Ken has served on our board for several years. He is a Marine, an attorney, has been a public servant for a number of years, the last 9 leading 3 agencies in the state of Florida. So without further ado, I'd like you to be the first group to hear from our interim executive director, Ken Lawson.
Kent, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And you're right, Whitney's been a great leader, has led this organization with grace, strength, and love. And as the search committee searched for a new executive director, in between Whitney and myself and the new person, I hope to be a bridge. I mean, the best bridge I can, support the principles of our organization. And I hope to lead with love, grace, and earn the respect of everyone. And next week, I hope to come to Asheville, begin meeting folks, and get to work to ensure during this time where we're searching for a new director that I learn how to best serve our organization. And everyone in this call, everyone in our family, I will need your help to do a great job. And with that being said, I want to give everyone my personal cell phone number. So you can call me, reach out to me, and give me wisdom and advice and kick me in the head when I'm going the wrong way. But my personal number is 813-751-9899. Now say it again, 813-751-9899. We're in this thing together, and I look forward to working with everybody to ensure that we cross the bridge to the new generation and take care of our family with love, grace, and respect. Thank you, Kent, and I want to kick it over to Whitney. Whitney?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And thanks to everybody for joining us this evening. It is so wonderful to see your faces. Our NCOBS family is always growing and expanding, but there's certain faces I can count on seeing all the time, and many of you all are right here. So thanks for joining tonight. I am thrilled that Ken Lawson has agreed to be the interim executive director while the search for a permanent ED takes place. The first time I met Ken 6 years ago when he joined our board, I knew he would provide the leadership that we need, and he would assist NCOBS in many ways. Maybe I didn't project this to be part of Ken's role in our school, but what you will learn is that Ken is an exceptional and natural leader. He's extremely bright, and he is always optimistic. Those characteristics will help him move the school forward. And as he called this the bridge period, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done to keep our school together and moving forward. And I believe with all my heart that Ken is the right person for this job. So Ken, I look forward to working with you over the next several weeks as you transition into this role. You know, a great deal has happened since our last town hall on July the 8th. And I hope this time together this evening will bring you up to speed on all that is going on in our school, and also provide time for you to ask any questions that you might want to. As you may recall from prior town hall meetings or things you may have read that our school published, you know, after our PPP funding expired in early June, NCOBS was forced to lay off 140 staff members, while 22 dedicated staff maintained the day-to-day workings of the school. During this time period, the team focused on tackling several key projects that would have been hard to do while we were programming. As you know, we program all but 4 or 5 days of a calendar year. So that doesn't leave a lot of time to pick up new projects and do things such as upgrade technology. And so we took this time to do that work. And when we reopen or go back, not reopen, when we go back to hopefully some bit of normalcy at our school, will be a much more efficient operation due to these technology changes. You know, we also took the time to really keep our dedicated staff that were temporarily laid off, you know, up to date with what's going on at the school. As decisions were being made, as we worked to start programming again, we wanted them to know that we care for them. We want them to return as soon as possible. So I want to thank our communications team, which Carrie Myers led, along with several other staff, to keep that information flow going constantly. It's been really, really important for us. Another significant project that we've been able to complete these last few months is the rebuilding of the food hut at Everglades City, which is now 11 feet above sea level. So hopefully we won't have to use those 11 feet anytime soon. But that was the last structure that had to be rebuilt from all the impact of Hurricane Irma in 2017. We also completed a new building called Webby's Watch. Webby's Watch is a staff pavilion that was named in honor of John Webster. Many of y'all know John. 35 or so years, John's been a part of our school as a board member, and he served as executive director for a few of those years. And it's really awesome that this new building is up in John's honor. So well deserved. One of the other projects that we focused on is thinking about what our program calendar might look like in 2021. Of course, there's still so many unknowns of how this virus may impact our ability to program next year. But we do know that we will lose several senior field staff between now and when we can program full time again. And so we're planning the best we can for that inevitable change. And so we have a program calendar set that's reduced by somewhere between 40 and 50% for next year as we rebuild. And hopefully we'll be in 2022 much closer to the level of programming we were prior to this pandemic. And it was also during this time that I decided to step down as executive director and make room for new leadership. I believe new leadership can move the school forward and prepare us for the future. And I want to step out of the way and allow that to happen. I'll also take some time to breathe a little more deeply after my tenure here at the school. This evening, I'm really excited to share that we intend to begin programming in December in the Everglades. Finally, after many, many months of planning and preparations and working through new protocols and policies, we believe that we are ready and we're meeting the metrics that are required for us to start programming again. As you may recall from other town halls, Outward Bound USA worked closely with the safety directors of each of our schools around the system to develop new policies and protocols for programming during this period that is now called the pandemic, the coronavirus. So NCOBS is meeting those metrics, and we have them in place to reasonably mitigate the risk from the virus. One of those metrics that we had to meet was the state of Florida, particularly Southern Florida, had to reduce their cases per day. And thankfully, they are now down to a very low number of new cases every day. So we've been able to hire the staff that we need to come back and work in the Everglades over the winter. Now, we're going to take this slowly, as I think we appropriately need to. So instead of running 8 crews at a time, which is our normal capacity in the Everglades program area, we're only going to run 2 crews at a time as we practice these new protocols, make sure that we have things set, and then really develop the confidence that we need to resume programming in the spring or the summer at a much higher level. So I think that's going to be an exciting time for us, and we are all thrilled to have students in the field again. Enrollment for this winter looks strong, particularly with our semester and our outdoor educator courses, which are already full. So that's very, very, very exciting for all of us. So come December, send good thoughts down to the Everglades, a place that we all know and love called Sunset Island, to make sure that we can deliver safe and quality programs to our students. You know, several of you have asked questions about staff retention during the pandemic, and let me just go ahead and address some of that now. You know, it was painful to lay off as many staff as we had to in June. We knew this was going to be a long haul, and while we supported them the best we could, we also knew that many might move to other stages of life. And while we don't fully know the impact of that, we do know that a lot of our field staff have decided to go to graduate school, move on to other careers, and do something different with their life. And we understand that. Nonetheless, it is sad for us. We also know that some of the temporarily laid off admin staff have decided to move on. Woody, as you may know, Matt Roski has taken a job with 23rd Veteran, one of our great partner veteran organizations. Other staff too that worked in the town office have decided to move on. But we are beginning to recall staff over a phased period that were laid off to work in the town office. Some of that will happen in the next 2 weeks, and then some again in January. So we're going to do this in waves. We also will be rehiring a handful of program staff for the Everglades. So overall, we know that going back to programming, recalling staff is going to be such a positive boost to our morale right now. It's been, while we've tried to maintain keeping our heads up and our optimism, it's been tough for our school. And I'm really, really proud of everyone for sticking with us to get to where we are, and knowing that we can begin programming soon is really going to be a nice boost for us. Many of you have also asked about how the school's doing financially during this time. You know, in our last full fiscal year of programming, our budget was just over $8 million, and we served around 5,500 students for that budget. This year, the year that will end March 31, 2021, we believe our total budget will be somewhere around $4 million, with $1 million of that in revenue being the PPP funding that we receive from the federal government. The majority of the rest of the revenue that we have will be fundraised. We have a $1 million goal for unrestricted fundraising, and I'm really pleased to share that we are at $612,000 to date. We will need your help to get to the $1 million, and we hope you will support us in those endeavors. We also have many really generous donors of endowments that have allowed us to unrestrict their funds that were to be used this summer particularly, or for other scholarships or other programs, to allow us to use for operations. Between the PPP funding, the fundraising that's going on, and those generous donors that have unrestricted some of their endowment dollars for us to use, we believe we have a very good shot of hitting a break even by March 31st. Now, we'd hoped to do a bit more programming in the Everglades when we revised our budget back in July, and we've scaled that back. So we are now working on a plan B to reduce some other expenses so we can hit break even by year end. If we're able to do that with good cash reserves, we should start next fiscal year in a really, really strong place. So NCOBS has a lot to be thankful for, even in this very bizarre time. And so many of you all are part of that we're thankful for. And the school will be strong. And I do encourage all of you to stay tuned and stick with us as we move back to a more normal state. You know, as I mentioned earlier, there were several questions that were sent in as part of the RSVPs to the town hall. So let me address those now, and then we'll open up for some other questions. The first question that came in is, what does staffing look like for next summer? Well, we don't fully know yet what staffing is going to be like next summer. We know that we're losing some senior level field staff to be course directors. One of our base camp managers has moved in to support our finance office. So as y'all know from your days in the field with us, when there is that kind of move up in the ranks of field staff, it starts to create holes in other parts of the school. So we're working diligently through that time period. And Deb Whitmore, along with the staffing managers, will work to have a better line of sight on what that's going to look like for next summer. Dream sheets will be going out in the not too distant future for the spring, and we'll begin to work towards a better handle on what that will be like. But because of our prediction that we're going to lose a good number of senior field staff, that is why we did reduce our program calendar for next year. And by the way, that same phenomenon, of course, is happening around the system. And I'll speak more about this, about the other schools shortly. The other question that came up is, our staff pursuing other things like new jobs or graduate school? And as I said earlier, yes, you know, a lot have. They've taken advantage of this time to make some other changes for themselves, and that's fully understandable. I do want to just touch briefly about the system, about OB, all the schools around the system. So right now, Voyager Outward Bound School has 7 brigades in the field. They call them brigades, we call them crews. But they're out paddling around the boundary waters right now. And then Colorado Outward Bound School has 3 crews in the field as well. So what we're hearing back from both COBS and VOBS is that those programs are going very smoothly. The protocols that have been put in place for social distancing until we know that everybody is free of COVID, and then moving on to the normal type of a program of training, main, and final is working. So the first crew that went in the field in the fall is already out. It was COVID-free. It was at Voyager, and I spent past 2 days in Atlanta, actually with the executive director of the Voyager School, and he was really reaffirming that these protocols work. Staff are motivated. Staff are seeing that this new type of program plan is doable, and we still deliver a great Outward Bound course. So the other schools around the system are like us right now and planning to start programming again soon. The Hurricane On Outward Bound School will be running limited programs out of Big Pine Key this winter. They have asked us to partner with them on 2 semester crews, which is great. So we'll take those 2 crews out for the first 2 weeks of their course. And Deb, I may ask you to chime in here if there are any specific questions about that. And then those students will transition down to Big Pine Key and get on the pulling boats for the rest of their course. Voyager Outward Bound will be doing their normal dock sledding this winter, as well as programs down in Texas. Outward Bound California is hoping to do more one-day type programs. They have a new ropes course in the Bay Area, and that has been it's been approved by the city to start operations. The Northwest Outward Bound School will not be programming this winter, but they'll be planning to program again next spring and summer. What we call the community-based schools in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and in Boston, Thompson Outward Bound Center, New York City Outward Bound, and Omaha Outward Bound are all regaining one-day programs. Most of those schools I just mentioned work closely with schools, public schools particularly. And as we know, public schools everywhere are not doing field trips. They're not fully up to speed. So those schools that are in those cities that work with those school systems will have very limited programming over the winter, unless some of the metrics that they can meet for those school systems to reopen their field trips. OBUSA continues to be a great support mechanism for all the schools, particularly around safety and risk management practices. So before I open it up for questions, and as Sabrina mentioned, and Sabrina, thanks for organizing all this. You do this so wonderfully. It's glad to have you back, by the way. Please put your questions in a chat or raise your hand so Sabrina can call on you. But just before I go to answering your questions, I just want to say thank you. I've had a tremendous 14 years at this school, working alongside all of you to do the important work that we do. Without your support, our school wouldn't be where we are and wouldn't be who we are. And it has been truly, truly an honor for me to be a part of this organization. And while I'm stepping out, I will always be here to support Ken as the interim ED and support the permanent ED when they're in place, as well as the board and staff and all of you all. This school is very special to me. It's deep in my heart. And while I'm going to take a little bit of a break for a while, I will resurface, and I do look forward to being a part of the school for a long, long time in the future as a volunteer. So with that, let's turn it over to some questions. Sabrina, would you like to read them out, please?
Yes. Any questions in the chat box have been covered. So if there's anyone who wants to raise their hand, if you want to be seen on video, feel free. We'll wait a second and give you a chance to type. There is a question about Jedi.
Yeah, so would you like to read it out, Sabrina, so everyone can hear it, please?
Yes, it says, where is the Jedi work currently? And just for reference, Jedi is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Yeah, thanks for that question, Doc. So most of us think of that term just as being DEI or EID, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the firm that we're working with from California to help us navigate through this work that they're doing on the audit has introduced this term JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So where we are with that work, Doc, is just to kind of back up, last fall, we made the decision to hire an outside firm to do an audit for us to help us learn where we are as an organization on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly as it relates to serving students. So over the past number of years, and in large part because of the success of the fundraising campaign of the 50th, we've been able to expand our programs fairly significantly. And we're working with different types of student populations. And what we've learned during that period of growth is that our staff do really good work with certain populations, and there's still a lot we need to learn to serve all populations as best as we can. So we asked the Arthur Blank Foundation for a grant to fund this audit. They approved that in the fall. In March, we started the work in earnest with a school-wide webinar. And then we moved into the spring and early summer with a cultural assessment. The results from that cultural assessment are back. And we will be receiving a plan from the Avarna Group based on their findings that we will then work with our board and staff to decide what pieces of that plan we want to introduce to the school and focus on. So that work will take us several years. Actually, you never end the journey. Once you start the journey, you never end it. So we're going to dig in more deeply with it over the next several months. I think Ken can play a great role in leading the school during that time period as we make those critical decisions on where we need to go to be better prepared to serve our students and to create a more equitable organization for our staff. And we'll keep it moving. So Doc, I hope that answers your question. Great. Great. There is a question about testing. What kind of testing or pre-course quarantine are you doing?
Deb, would you like to answer that question, please?
Absolutely. So in working with OB USA, we are looking at requiring staff and students to be tested for COVID before arrival to their course. And we probably are all very aware that testing in this country still has a way to go with regards to reliability, access for all, and a host of other things. So we are still moving forward with that, and we are working with a company to test all the staff, because we want to make sure that that isn't a barrier for any of our staff. So NCOBS is covering that. We have a contract with a company to ensure that. And we're also looking into, when we have larger school groups, that we may be able to use that contractor for helping out our partners also, just in ensuring that we can get testing results back in a short time frame. And then what we are asking of staff and students is they will be signing a statement of understanding that clearly identifies that for 14 days before they come to work or before they come on course, that we want them to be practicing really strict social distancing, which is very different from isolation or quarantine. So we're asking them to do all the behaviors that the CDC is saying: wear a mask, stay out of large groups, wash your hands, reduce your exposure by staying home as much as possible. So they're sort of the metrics that we have in place for folks, and we're looking forward to testing through those come December. And it's just really great to see our counterparts, Voyager and COBS, already putting it to use. So that's really great to see.
Great. Thank you, Deb.
Looking for any more questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, or you can click on your name and raise your hand if you'd like to voice your question.
So Sabrina, while we're waiting for that, I'd like to invite Mark Brown, former staff of NCOBS and other schools around the country. He just published a great book on Outward Bound leadership. And Mark, would you mind just sharing just a bit about your book, please?
Well, thank you, Whitney. Would be happy to do that, and great to see so many faces from my time back in Asheville. But I published a book in partnership with Outward Bound USA that was called Outward Bound Lessons to Live a Life of Leadership, and I'm grateful to the North Carolina School for actually hosting the kickoff of the book launch, which was actually just about a year ago. And from that time, I had the opportunity through the fall and winter to travel all over the country and partner with a lot of the Outward Bound schools in bringing the book forward. We also ended up with international rights for the book being sold in the Indian subcontinent and just recently in Germany as well. So the book's continuing on steady sales, and it's been really, it's been a real privilege for me to get to share kind of the everything that I gained from being a part of Outward Bound. And certainly a lot of the North Carolina school is represented from a lot of the people that I talked to. Essentially, the book is a series of interviews that I did with people who were either Outward Bound instructors or former staff people who then went on to have some pretty amazing impact in the world.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. Would you please just type in the name of the book in the chat in case others would like to look into it, please?
Whitney, we have two questions. One is related to the FINS program. Interested in learning what we have learned from our handling of the FINS program.
Yeah, thanks. And Alan, thank you for that question. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by handling the situation, but let me just provide a little background to all of that and see if that answers your question, Alan. So the FINS program, FINS stands for Families in Need of Services. It was a program that was originated by HIOBS 35 or so years ago. During the consolidated time period, it moved into OB USA. And then at the time of the deconsolidation at the end of 2011, Outward Bound USA asked NCOBS if we would take the program on, because otherwise it was going to go away. So our management team and our board worked pretty quickly to figure out if we could, from a financial situation as well as safety and risk management, take on this program, and we decided that we could, and we started that work, Alan. So FINS is funded by the Department of Juvenile Justice in the state of Florida. So this was the first program that, I'm going to use air quotes, that, you know, the at-risk label, the first real at-risk program that the North Carolina Outward Bound School delivered. So over the course from the beginning of 2012 to this most recent March, NCOBS worked really hard to support that program, Alan. And as you may or may not know, NCOBS invested over $500,000 into that program over that time period, a fact that is often left out of this conversation. Also during that time period, the state of Florida made many changes in how we could recruit students, meaning it became more and more challenging to recruit students based on use of psychotropic medications, for example. The Department of Juvenile Justice also decided to keep some of their offenders in the community as opposed to removing them from the community. And that meant that we were seeing more and more severe behaviors on course. That actually resulted last year, or the last 18 months, there were time periods where 2 different crews actually attacked our staff and physically beat them. We decided at that point that it was going to be very much of a challenge for us to maintain that program, knowing that we had safety concerns, we had risk management concerns. The state of Florida became less of a good partner in the program. So around January of this year, a number of senior field staff in the FINS program decided it was time for them to leave to go do something else. So we were looking at a huge shortfall in qualified staff to deliver that program in this current year. So we knew that we were going to be probably 35 to 40% below the contract amount in order to run that program. NCOBS could not take on an additional $300,000 to $400,000 loss to maintain that program, Alan. So we made the hard decision to close it. So we announced that on March the 3rd. You might remember that was when COVID was really picking up. And so it was unfortunate we had to make that decision, and we announced that decision. At the same time, the pandemic really kicked into high gear. And so one of the things that we did learn, I think, Alan, from this is the communication with the staff there to better explain why the decision was made, to try to give the runway that they needed to move on to other parts of their lives. So we did the best we could in that moment in time. And if we could redo it, Alan, I think we would do some of those things better. However, the circumstances just made it very, very challenging with trying to figure out how to deal with the pandemic, what to do with our staff. We had to close our own programs. It was a perfect storm. And unfortunately, we really angered a lot of the FINS staff, and they've been public with their anger. And so we are working with those staff that are angry. We're going to host a listening session sometime next month so we can hear their grievances, and hopefully we'll learn more from that, Alan.
Thank you for that perspective. I mean, I know some of those staff, and I've certainly read their letters, and I wanted to also have a broader picture, which you've provided. So thank you.
Yeah, and it is, that the students that we served in that program were some of the most marginalized students in the state of Florida, right? And it was to really change the school to prison pipeline that was in place. And I totally understand the hurt and anger those staff have of NCOBS in their minds. We turned our back on those students. It's a both and, because the both is yes, that is, and we were facing some significant challenges in keeping that program going. And my point of view, and a big part of my decision, is I was concerned about the whole school, protecting the whole school, not just a program. So thank you, Alan, for that question.
Yep.
Okay, Whitney, there are 2 questions, and if you don't mind, I'm going to answer one of them really quickly.
I don't
Woody,
mind.
Woody asked about Carl Ronke, and if anyone hasn't heard, he passed away a few weeks ago, and he's just such a monumental part of the NCOB's history. And so we are actually working on collecting some stories from his time. I'm working with Mike Beshesher on that project. So hopefully we will have something put together within a couple weeks, Woody, to share with everyone. So.
Yeah, as we all know, Donald was Carl, a great staff member of ours way back in the early days. He's the father of ropes courses. He's the person that really took and created Project Adventure to take so much of the work that we do and spread it out around the country. Carl was a giant, there's no question, and we will miss him.
And he was one of my mentors.
Absolutely.
Well, then hopefully you and I can talk at some point too, Woody, as I'm collecting all of those stories. So.
Oh, I have a few for you.
Awesome. Okay. There is a question.
Hey, Sabrina, if you don't mind me just tell one story about Carl. It was probably 10 or 12 years ago that Carl came to All Staff, and he spent the couple days with us. And at one point, he had over 100 of our staff out on the lawn there, just beyond the pavilion at Cedar Rock, doing initiatives. And it was an amazing sight to behold how one person could have that many people engaged and entertained for 3 or 4 hours. And then when that was over, my son Harris, who at the time was 7 or 8 years old, and I took Carl to the airport. And I was so excited I was going to have this time with Carl to learn from the master. And those of you that know Carl, this will not surprise you. He spent the entire drive from Cedar Rock to the airport with his head turned around, talking to my son, doing riddles, playing games in the car. It was something to behold. So thank you for letting me share that. Sabrina?
Yes, there is a question about Jedi. It says, aside from what the audit says, what is the staff general opinion about we have done over the past 10 years with Jedi work?
Yeah, let me answer that by putting some timeline in context to this. So we all know about George Floyd's murder in May, and that was a time period in which we were starting the cultural assessment of our school. Staff were isolated at Table Rock. They soon were laid off. It was a tough time for all of us. So, there were a lot of comments that staff made about our inability to work with marginalized communities. There were a lot of comments around our need and opportunity to do better training for those staff. And there also were comments about how we can create a more equitable organization in terms of compensation, around decision-making and transparency. So those are some of the things that we also learned from that work. And Alexis or Deborah Carey that are on the Jedi committee, if you want to add anything to that, please feel free to.
No, I think that was great. I mean, it's definitely come a great way. And I think the conversations that have been happening have been really enriching to move us forward in the next generation. So it has been a challenging process, absolutely, but also really, really great and necessary process.
Great, thank you, Carrie.
Okay, the next question is about starting back courses. What is the contingency plan for courses if numbers start to go back up?
Deb, you want to answer that, please?
I assume the question is the numbers go up regarding COVID. That's how I'm going to answer this question. So we've gone through a pretty rigorous process under the guidance of OB USA and the Safety and Risk Department. So we have what we're calling a resumption checklist, which has many protocols, steps in place, and it's also got a number of what we call gates or metrics that even though we have a calendar and we're moving forward with clients and we've hired staff, we are measuring those metrics down to the wire, down to the 24 hours before course, so that we can ensure that we are mitigating the risks as much as possible. And so one of the metrics, Whitney alluded to it, is the number of daily cases in our county or where the base camp lives per 100,000 people. So that is one metric, including infection rate and also the ability for the ICUs and the EMS to provide support. So we still have many gates in front of us that will allow us to stop, cease, delay, and then move forward depending on how the metrics pan out. So that's the protocols that we have with responding to COVID, and that's what's making it very uncertain for planning and execution.
Great, thank you, Deb. Maggie, did that answer your question okay? Great.
Last call for questions, hand raises. There's nothing else in the comment box currently. Give it one more minute. I think the floor is yours, Whitney.
Great. So again, thanks everybody so much for joining us tonight to learn about the school that we love so much. And again, thank you all for all you do to keep our school moving in the right direction, for the support from me, for Kent, our board chair, that is navigating these challenging waters so effectively. And Kent, your leadership is so admirable. Thank you. And Ken Lawson, can't wait to have you up here next week, and we'll get started. So with that, good night, everybody. Have a super day. Thanks again.